quick introduction. I'm a partner with Amrock, and Amrock is a global leadership consulting firm. One of our practices that we do is on board consulting, where we help companies form boards, we help companies recruit independent directors, appoint non-executive chairmen, and we also help companies review their boards for being effective. So those are the various things we do for our clients, and hence my inputs would be probably less to do with the legislation or regulation side of the board, but more to do with the leadership side of the board, and you know, what makes ultimately boards effective, because it is a body of senior leaders which comes together and then does a variety of things. But I'd like to start by saying that, you know, and I make a small quote, it's not a quote but a statement, saying that well-governed companies often draw huge premiums. They have access to cheaper funds and they have greater value. So the point to make here is that governance and corporate governance is not just a amorphous topic where a few people on boards and a few processes are yielding so-called effectiveness. There is real value to be created by companies, which financial value to be created by companies by being well governed. At the same time, I would make a second statement by saying that you know, when boards fail and when scandals come out, you know, they're very visible. We all know about Satyam scandal, and we know about the WorldCom scandal, we know about the Enron scandal. So these scandals hit headlines and a whole bunch of analysis comes as a consequence. What we don't realize that there are probably multitudes of, and part of that, they're seen to represent and embody corporate governance. Why do we have this huge gap where there are very few well-governed companies? And to say that the West has created a model which we can emulate may not be correct, because there are enough scandals that come out of the West and the developed countries. So, so we've sort of done a lot of our own thinking, research, and I'm making a few statements out of that. So the first statement really is, it's nothing to do with regulation, nothing to do with actually independent directors. It's got to do with the vision of the company. If the owners of the company, the chairman, the shareholders, or whosoever owns that company doesn't have the vision of corporate governance, then there is no hope in the hell of having the right board doing the right things, etc. So it starts with that vision. So in many ways, in the chicken and egg of whether you have good directors, a good board, and you know, and the chairmen can keep complaining how many directors, you know, we don't get good directors. It really starts with them saying, do you have the vision? Do you wish to be well governed? And do you wish to lead governance practices? And hence, do you wish to use your board in the right way? Because that will form the fundamental of how do you create your board. So, so that is the first issue. And unfortunately, in India, and this is not really a criticism, but probably a fact of evolution. The fact is that in India, real private sector, which today represents corporate for us. I mean, we know there's a lot of government in business today, and the PSUs equally have, the public sector units have equally the same issues. And by the way, our study says that they have more governance issues than probably the private sector today. If you look at just the sheer technical part of the board, you may find a lot of wrong practices being in public sector boards. But coming back to the private sector, which we all relate to much more, the fact is that most companies have boards because it's mandated by the company law. But most boards, as we look at them, end up doing really compliance work. They're ticking the boxes, as some of my fellow panelists have said, and you have some very eminent people sitting on these boards and they tick boxes. Because the boards want them to tick boxes, because the processes and the meetings are like that, because the real issues are not put on the table. So that's what most of the boards end up doing. At the same time, I must also say that it's not as if the companies willingly want them to do that. Some of them are actually caught because the companies may lack awareness of how to create good boards, how to create good governance. So I think there's an issue of education which we see here. And we have, for example, companies requesting us to saying that, look, can we create an advisory board? Now, why the hell do you need an advisory board when you have your own board, which is the proper board? But they're saying that because they see this board as being actually quite restricted, it's procedural, they ask too many questions, and they're so bothered with compliance that they actually are not engaging with the chairman or the real shareholders on issues of strategy, where his or her discomfort is, etc. So we actually have a disconnect, a real life disconnect that plays out. And then they say, let's have an advisory board which is only for advising, which gives me the real inputs on my risk issues, my strategic issues, my challenges of dealing with leadership, etc., etc. So they try and split the mandate of the board. But there are companies which are using their boards and putting these mandates in front of them and have actually gained benefits out of that. That's the good news. And I think we are getting there. Because I think most companies, the good news is that we have very smart people in India. And when you look at owners of Indian companies, they are actually very smart people. So they will get it right, and it's an evolutionary process. Many of them will not get it right, but I think a lot will get right because the right questions are being raised.